What is up, down, and sideways? All you beautiful people. It is League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys to recap what we knew would be the most insane weekend probably of the year, and I would say lived up to the hype.
Absolutely lived up to the hype all across every region. We got bangers all across the board, full games. You had everything. You had the ecstasy of going to Worlds, finding your way through, grinding it out, the pop-off performances. And you got the downsides, the teams that their year is over, the mistakes, the costly errors. It's all there this weekend.
And I didn't think that we would be talking about G2 as one of those teams. We saw the final recap with Caps with him and Yankos. They will not be heading to the World Championship for the first time ever in the organization's history. The first time we won't be seeing Caps at the World Championship since he's been around. And all that being said, Fnatic deserves to go over them, Mark. That's it.
When you've been thinking about Europe's presence at Worlds, G2, that's it. They're there every single time. And whether you're thinking about, what they've been able to accomplish, the disappointments, everything in between, they were there and they were such a pillar for the European community. Another pillar of that European community, though, is Fnatic, and they are the ones securing their spot. And man, what a year it has been for Fnatic, from the fans, from everything in the off season to what you were able to add, the struggles throughout spring, the changes for summer. Man, it's all gravy going to Worlds now.
And this series, it went to the game 5. It was Fnatic coming back from the 1-2 deficit, but it just felt like G2 had to work so hard for their wins. It was very close games. And then when you're looking at Fnatic's wins, they were stomps for the most part. They had an almost 20k gold lead in game 4. They had plus 34 in kills, plus 12 in turrets throughout the entire series. If you're a fan of EU, you want to see this version of Fnatic at Worlds more than this version of G2 because they just haven't given us enough all year long.
What we were seeing in these games, you were finding ways that when G2 was able to get close to kind of an average level of performance of what we expect from them, towards good, that's when they were in these fights. They were in the games, and that's where they picked up their victories. But any time that they slipped up, anytime they weren't up to an excellent level, Fnatic took complete advantage of it. It doesn't matter who you want to be looking at on that Fnatic roster. You want to look at the rookie Adam in the top lane, absolutely embarrassing wonder on multiple occasions, and of course in that all-important game 5,
Darius
Darius coming through, Whippo being a huge difference maker in the jungle, something that again seems so crazy to talk about that type of change, and then until you start to see it in action and go, wait a minute, this is actually the way it should be looking at. This is good for Whippo, this is great for Fnatic. You see it play through, and of course we can't miss talking about your boy Niski stepping over the pond. No, people didn't want him as the replacement on this Fnatic roster. He proves his worth big time with the Twisted Fate especially.
And talking replacements, this is the biggest statement series of Upset's entire career. He played fantastic across it. Now he's going to Worlds for the first time after replacing the best AD carry in the history of Europe, probably even Western League of Legends. Fnatic, it's going to bring that wildcard factor that we're accustomed to seeing G2 bring, but didn't get out of them in 2021 when we head to Worlds. So be happy that Fnatic is going to be that third team representing Europe at the World Championship. We also got that third team in North America, and of course, it was another Game 5. The C9 versus TSM rivalry it hits another level, and this was another example of C9 who were down 1-2 in this series, and we know that is exactly where Perkz wants to be, because after that, Games 4 and 5, he was 15-1 and 16.
Yeah, well, it was a different story when you're talking about what happened in the later half of the series for Perkz and for Cloud9. And it's one of those things where you got to examine, a 2-1 advantage for the other side. You're facing down the barrel of your season ending. Is that a pro and a con in the sense of you're totally free, in the sense of that this is what you need. You've got to leave everything out there on the table. There's nothing left in reserve. That's what you started to see from players like Perkz and Sven coming up with the big clutch performances. And the big reason why These guys get paid those big dollars is how they perform in these clutch moments. Perkz stepping up big time. The redemption on the Irelia. Yes, the draft is something else that you need to examine in that game 5 and other decision makings and execution. But you have to really be putting all the praise towards Cloud9 and the job they did to get back into this series and then to slam the door in game 5.
And despite Sven and Vulcan having some suspect 2v2 moments in the laning phase, obviously you had the Pantheon support to help smash the lane for TSM earlier in this series. But when the team fights were coming around, whether it was on the Jhin, the Varus, or the Ezreal for Sven, he had countless team fights where he was able to come up clutch for the squad. And a guy who's been memed so many times in the LCS playoffs, we finally get a series where we can just praise him fully.
Yeah, and again, to come through in the clutch, right? There's been lots of moments where we've been able to look at Sven and you can, hyper criticize him. And, some of them aren't, needing a major magnifying glass, the Ezreal, to see some of these big mistakes and big moments. But again, as I said, more often than not, these are the guys that come through when it matters for your squad. The Jhin game, especially to me, yes, you're pairing it with other things that are helping it be super effective. Jhin himself right now is not the best option for all the bot laners as it goes, but the way that he piloted him and the way that he utilized the kit, perfect for C9.
Yeah, and on the TSM side, I think Cloud9, everyone still kind of had them as the favorites coming into this, and despite not going to Worlds, I don't know if it's a disappointment of a season for them, because even coming into this split, I think a lot of people probably had these 3 teams that are heading to Worlds ahead of TSM in the rankings.
We talked about it very early in the year. I think I was actually maybe even after, the preseason showcase tournament that we had. And we talked about TSM might be slotting into kind of this 4-5 territory. And I think for most of the year, they punched above their weight. They were doing better than expectations. Unfortunately, in this series, you saw the total tale of a team like TSM. You have players like Huni, Swordart, that are feast or famine. They're all in all the time. And you know what? You saw games where it worked out for you. You have the Camille, things of that. But then you also have 0-6 Renekton's, and you have the ugly Nocturne and everything else. But that was really just the identity of TSM all year round. Most of the time, it was in their favor. Ran out of time in this series.
And they ran into a man named Luca the Bazooka in the mid lane. Now looking across to his EU brethren in G2, not going to the World Championship. Cloud9 returning to Worlds after missing it from last year. Maybe this dude is worth that $11 million price tag that we saw him coming over to North America. Over to the LCK now, because these series, they are rapid fire. They do not stop. T1 versus Gen G. We know how it played out in the spring split, 3-0 for Gen G, but kind of slumping coming into this series. And T1, isn't it absolutely mind-boggling that Teddy has been benched for 80% of the summer split, and then he puts on a performance like this series? Like, this guy's been on the bench.
And isn't it also crazy that even after game 1, where it was looking like, oh no, this might be the repeat of the spring series in playoffs for T1 against Gen G, people are going, where's Gumiyashi? Get Teddy out of here. My man, crazy to see what's going on and the way that he played throughout the rest of this series. That Nexus defense barely getting off the back to make sure he's there. Incredible stuff. Yes, he was fantastic. Not the only member of T1 that brought in big performances on the day, but certainly a nice reminder for the rest of the world that Teddy is still there, and he still is one of the premier ADCs.
And most importantly, Riot can breathe a sigh of relief, because Faker will be heading to Worlds. So they said, okay, the music video, it's okay. We've got Faker in 50% of it, so we're all good to go.
You'd love to have Faker back at Worlds, my man. It is where he belongs, and we get to see him fighting once again for another championship. But before that, he's got to take on his man Koma for the 10-ring title in the LCK.
Yeah, obviously that's going to be an amazing matchup, but I think T1, they played kind of what people were hoping for, right? They played at a high level, and this is what you wanted to see in that, because they had the momentum in spring. This is kind of what you expected to see. This was the only 4-game series of the weekend, by the way. And Gen G, I mean, they're still looking like they're probably going to be going to Worlds. I think it doesn't even really matter how these finals play out. There's a good chance they're going, but I just, my confidence is shook with Gen G, Mark.
Yeah, I don't think you can have the same level of confidence as you would have had maybe midway through summer for this squad and what Gen G were able to play, and then what they were counteracted with T1, right? They came into game one and they had their identity, their plan, and they executed on it fantastically. And then when things started to go a bit sideways throughout games 2, 3, they never really showed you that killer instinct, that absolute elite level of pressure they could exert on the T1 lineup and what they were able to do. And I think one of the things that I look at, and it's I don't know if it's necessarily fair because Life had a lot of good moments in this series, but man, did he ever get outshined by what Kyria was able to do. And I know if you're holding what Kyria is able to do in the playmaking
does that to a lot of people.
Standard, I know a lot of people are not going to be able to meet it, but that's what the story goes when you're in a series and that's your counterpart and outplays you.
That's how high the stakes are when there's not many, when we're in the semifinals of the LCK playoffs. You alluded to it. The opposite of T1 in these finals is going to be Damwon, and you can be happy about everything you're seeing out of T1. Damwon's 3-0 in Nongshim, and yes, it wasn't a stomp. Throughout this series, there were some close games, some close moments, but Damwon are looking like they're returning to that World Championship form. They've discovered, hey, you know what? Ghost, why don't you just play Ziggs every game?
Yeah, and you know what? That's going to be an interesting thing because what we have seen around the world, and especially with Ziggs being the way that he has been the last couple of weeks, has certainly been that there's either teams that know how to play with Ziggs and know how to play against Ziggs, and there's teams that don't know how to play with Ziggs or how to play against a Ziggs. So that's really going to be the question for T1 because, yes, Damwon is clearly showing us that Ziggs, at least in their hands, at least in Ghost, is pilotable, is that type of difference maker that you're looking for. And that shores up the main weakness that you'd be looking at in this series for Damwon. You'd be looking at that advantage in the bottom lane of what Teddy and Kyria can provide, especially with the way Ghost and Beryl have played this year. That was your advantage. If you're able to shore that up by playing the Ziggs, that is a different story when you look at the other side of the map now and you've got to face down Khan, Canyon, and Showmaker.
Yeah, which was on full display this series with the 80% win rate Jason over 40 games for Khan. That is a disgusting win rate. And then I think there's no better team in the world to see the Diana Yasuo combo than when Canyon and Showmaker play it.
It's got to be the most lethal combo of players to play that one and execute on it is absolutely beautiful. And it makes you realize why you talk about that type of wombo combo and the way that's be able to be executed on. This is going to be the LCK finals that we wanted. I'm promising you right now, I'm putting it on the line. Not going to disappoint. We're going to get a banger from the LCK.
It's what people wanted from spring. It's only going to be higher stakes now that it is in the summer split. Talking about top seeds and finals, spring repeats, FPX versus LNG. If you just looked at the post-game thread or the score for this series, it did not do it justice. You see 3-0 and then you go, see, RNG just choked against LNG. They're not even good. No. LNG absolutely put up a fight in this series. I'm just telling you right now, FPX, they're on another planet, Mark. They're on another planet. I don't know what to say.
It's the reality, and I think, you have to definitely, as you said, have seen the actual series to understand that this is not, when you look back at the previous results to say, okay, this is not about RNG being bad. This was about LNG being at that level. The problem is there was a whole nother plateau to reach, and that is the FPX level. Weren't able to get there, and across the board, everybody, and I mean everybody on FPX brought it in this series. And you know what? It was necessary to pull out the three victories that they did. Just so happened to be the 3 in a row for the 3-0.
And yes, Doin B, I think is going to absolutely be in the conversation for best mid laner at the World Championship when we're talking about that, just like it was in 2019. But FPX as a whole, it was on full display in this series. It was their best attribute in 2019. They are just always on the same page. It's the whole team jumping back to Peel for LWX when he's on Aphelios. It's everyone split second engaging on somebody. During team fights, they move around. It looks like a single champion is controlling all of them.
And one of the things that would have been the criticism to FPX, or to even especially Doing B a couple years ago, is his laning, and yes, still not a premier laner individually. You look at this year compared to the World Championship year, he's doing better in lane individually than
especially
back
on
then.
an Irelia,
And yeah, if the meta shapes up the way it is, we still get a couple of champions, still get a nice healthy dose of 200 years from Riot. Could be some scary things coming from the super carry Doing B.
And we're still seeing him pull out a Galio, have an incredible Irelia performance, and then play these tankier, supportive mages. He's still capable of doing that. FPX is the scariest team in the world right now. At one point, we were saying EDG was the scariest team in the world, but that was before playoff World Elite was fully activated. 12-4 now in the playoffs. They got the 2-0 start on EDG. EDG forces the game 5 where they eventually get slapped. But the story for me was JJ in this series, because game 1, he loses the smite to Beishang, who flashes over as the Olaf, and then he loses the Elder Dragon to an Ezreal Q. And not 2 games later, we see him subbed out for a guy who hasn't played at all in the summer split.
Yeah, certainly an extreme choice from the coaching staff with EDG. But man, I'd be lying to you if I told you that I expected us to be talking at the end, this Monday after the weekend, and we'd be talking about an S-named mid laner in this series popping off. I would have said, yes, Scout, of course he's the guy who's going to get it done. No. We're talking about Shanks. He's the one that deserves credit and praise for what he was able to do in this series, especially in that game 5. You love to see the arc that he has been on this whole year. We even talked about them adding in Mole and expecting that to be worked in. The way Shanks is playing, there's no need for
his spot, man. He doesn't need Mole. Shanks is playing like that. So now we're getting World Elite versus FPX in that winners bracket, EDG versus LNG in losers. Obviously, FPX are going to be huge favorites, but it's time to stop sleeping on World Elite, obviously.
Absolutely, and the real question is, can World Elite do what LNG could not do? And yes, given what we saw against EDG, I think there's better chances of seeing a more full series, right? I don't want to say competitive because, yes, those 3 games for FPX LNG were very competitive. This series, I absolutely think that WE is going to be able to push and make FPX show us some extra stuff and dig deep to get through another round.
And that being said, really hoping for a bounce back from EDG, because that wasn't the full top-ranked team in the world EDG level that we were seeing throughout spring and for a lot of summer as well. But listen, RNG got 0-3 or 3-0 in spring and ended up bouncing back through losers, so there's still plenty of opportunity for EDG. Now we get to some of these actual winners matches in the LCS and LEC, starting with Mad Lions versus Rogue, which I'm calling this a masterclass 3-0 for Mad Lions. And the reason I say masterclass, it wasn't 3 stomps. It wasn't just pure dominance, nothing back from Rogue. The way they won each of these 3 games, you have one stomp that's in favor of Mad Lions. You have a very close, incredibly back and forth where Mad Lions is out team fighting Rogue. And then you have an incredible 10k deficit where they're also outplaying them in these team fights despite being behind so much in gold. They did everything put it all on full display in this series.
You had the full buffet from the Mad Lions.
Yeah.
You got breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert. I don't care what other type of meal, snacks you wanted in there included. You had every type of option and variety needed, and that is the thing that makes you feel so confident about Mad Lions moving forward, is how comfortable they looked in all of these games, individual players, and as a team, and their execution, their rotations, everything of that nature. Really, really liked what I saw from the Mad Lions this week, and as you said, yes, it wasn't necessarily about Rogue underperforming or not delivering. I think we will be critical of Rogue as we move further on, because we do want to see more from them and better from them. But for the Mad Lions, you can't dock them anything in that regard on what they showed and what they accomplished on the day. They gave you what you could have wanted and more.
I feel like Rogue had the mental block against G2. It was broken in spring. They finally beat them and they said, we're freed. And then they lose that finals against Mad Lions. Now you have this series, and all of a sudden it's like, I think they got a mental block again, but now it's against Mad Lions. I'm just glad there's none of this new Kings, the new era kind of thing. G2's out. Fnatic is it's coming back to the top, but it's not new or old Kings. It's just the Kings right now are Mad Lions. They're the best team in Europe. That's it.
Absolutely, and it's for Rogue. They get through the Dark Souls boss room, and they get into the next room, and it's another fog door, and they're like, oh no, and that's the Mad Lions door, and that's the one that sends you back to the bonfire.
Yeah, you got to be ready for New Game Plus when you're coming back against the Mad Lions. Lastly, Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves. It was another Game 5 in this one. Another one where Team Liquid was down 1-2. They end up coming back into the series, and there's a lot to talk about here. I think maybe you have do you have more hope for North America seeing these two teams go toe-to-toe at Worlds?
Just a little bit, but I want to say, if I'm grading, more so towards Team Liquid. I think a lot of that, yes, there's some ugly still there that we have seen and some stuff to iron out. But as far as the positives and what they can do to pressure another team, that's where I start to see a lot of the positives. My big question for this series is what was worse, actually, the Game 5 Nocturne coming out for Huni, or the multiple games of Ornn coming through on the side for 100 Thieves? Because I tell you what, whoever it was, Papa Smithy, Reaper, someday, I don't know who was calling for it. It was not the right choice.
Is it being scared of Alfari? I don't know. I can't imagine a guy like Someday is scared of anything on the planet, let alone anything in a League of Legends matchup. So yeah, that was a little weird to see. Obviously, Core JJ, guy to talk about, had a lot of game-changing engages team fights as we've been accustomed to seeing. Santorin, I think we've seen closer style on so many people in different series and games in the LCS. And Santorin, we've talked about this for years, kind of like what we had with Smithy before in Team Liquid, he's the great neutralizer. No jungler's going to pop off against him, it seems.
It's one thing that I'm really coming to understand, especially with Santorin, is when you look at the identity and play style of junglers like Closer, like Spica, guys that he has neutralized and outshined in these playoffs. They're the aggressive type. They're the one that want to bring the fight to you and style on your squad and make the advantages snowball for their team. Santorin is just always there to say no and deny them that and be there for the counter and push them the other way. Absolutely someone that has stepped up to the task required of him and provided more than that's been asked of him for this Team Liquid squad.
And yeah, it's just been, whether it's counter jungling or just kind of counter ganking, being there at all times, knowing where the opposing jungler is, that's something he has been so good at. So it's 100 Thieves going to be playing Cloud9 in that losers final. Team Liquid awaits the winner in the finals, and Mad Lions in the finals. Rogue versus Fnatic over in EU. This is the best weekend, but we still got a great next weekend with a lot of finals to get through.
I'll say next weekend is actually even better because you don't have the sadness from a lot of teams not going on to Worlds, having to say goodbye to players for the year.
It's just for seeding, that's all.
This one's all celebrations, my man. This one's all about we got who we want, now let's see who's the very best.
Yeah, at the very least, okay, you're winning a title, so that team full of elation, but if you're losing in finals, you're saying, all right, that sucks, but let's get ready for Worlds. The season isn't over yet, but this episode is over right now of League Unlock. Erica Mark here with you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you on that flippity flip.